And thank you, Linda. Thank you for the invitation. I have to say, following the morning session, I'm very humbled to be in the presence of so much brain power, which consumes so much omega-3, hopefully. But I have to say I appreciate very much the conversations that we had this morning. Very impressive, and it's my first time to be here. So thank you again, Linda. I appreciate it very much. I want to talk about an oil boom in a place called Nebraska. Before I tell you more about it, I better say a few words about Blair. Blair is a town quite close to Omaha in Nebraska. It has a population of about 8,000. It's about 1,200 miles from here, west. There's nothing remarkable in its history. But in the next few months, Blair is going to make a radical change in the aquaculture industry. And this is in the middle of America, 1,000 miles away from the sea. And yet here I am talking to you about Blair making an impact, a radical change in the aquaculture industry. And I hope it's going to be a major change. But before I talk about Blair, I want to talk to you about aquaculture. And you heard from Scott, aquaculture is growing. In fact, today, 50% of the fish production originates from aquaculture. In 10 years' time, 2/3 of fish will be produced from aquaculture. Today, it's worth $171 billion. In 2022, it'll be $226 billion. Rapid growth and an excellent earner. And in fact, if we look at just salmon, the consumption of salmon has increased dramatically, and people, consumers, relate to salmon as a very healthy food item and appreciate its content of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. In fact, a lot of Europeans now are taking very much towards salmon. The logistics are great, and the supply chains are fantastic, and you can do lots with salmon. However, as Scott was alluding to, and as I'm talking to you about aquaculture, the question is, can it continue to grow? Is aquaculture growth sustainable? Now, some of you in the room will know that to actually grow fish, you actually need wild fish stocks. And today, every year, 16 million metric tons of wild fish are removed from the seas and converted into fish meal and fish oil. Now, the wild fish stocks aren't actually increasing. They're a limited supply. They're a finite resource. They're a natural resource. But aquaculture is still growing. You and me are still eating more and more fish, particularly since the success of Linda. Yeah? 2 servings, and today we heard 3 servings. So aquaculture is continuing to grow, but the finite resource of wild fish stocks is not. In fact, it's on a slow decline. So, we have a problem. And according to the FAO Statistics, which Scott also alluded to, close to 30% of our wild fish stocks are actually overfished. And 58% are fully fished. And the wild fish stocks are not increasing. As I mentioned, they're decreasing. So as the world population increases to the 9-odd billion, and the consumption of fish increases with increasing GDP, the source of omega-3, the source of fish oil, which is required from the world fisheries, is actually not going to increase. And these statistics from the FAO actually ignore illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries. So the actual situation is actually perhaps more worse than we think. In addition to that, the reaction from the industry has been to reduce the amount of fish oil in feed, which has resulted actually in a decline over the past 10 years of the omega-3 EPA and DHA levels in fish, particularly for salmon. And this is the same in Norwegian, Tasmanian, or Chilean. There's simply not enough fish oil in the sea to feed all the fish. So the feed industry has reduced the levels. And the levels have been reduced to a biological level now. They cannot go any lower because salmon require omega-3 as well for their own health and performance. In addition to that, there are competing segments for omega-3. There's a supplement market of the human health, there's a pet food industry, there's a livestock industry, and there's a salmon industry, all competing for fish oil. And very soon, maybe in the next 18 months or longer, or even sooner, we will have a supply-demand gap of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. And in fact, out of the 1 million metric tons of fish oil which are extracted from the 16 million metric tons of wild fish, only 90,000 tons of EPA and DHA fatty acids arrive on our plates. So we have a problem. Growing world's population, the growth of aquaculture, but not enough supply of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. What's the solution? I want to take you to a story which involved NASA and some scientists from Martin Marietta. These scientists were looking at how to get rid of carbon dioxide which builds up in space operations. And what they realized was marine microalgae can actually quench and absorb CO2, carbon dioxide. Further investigation from the scientists of Marine Marietta was that this marine microalgae could actually be a nutrient. And some strains of marine microalgae actually created significant amounts of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. Thankfully for me, and that's why I'm standing here, I should say, talking to you, is those scientists created a company called Martech, and Martech was acquired by a company called DSM. And DSM is one of our investors in the company which I'm now managing called Veramaris. One of those brilliant scientists who helped us to actually extract and develop the omega-3 from these microalgae is actually Norman, sitting at the back there. He did the brilliant work to take the marine algae to industrial scale. And that takes me back to Blair, Nebraska. In Blair, Nebraska, we're going to invest $200 million. In fact, we already have. And it's going to be producing 15% of the global demand of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids for the aquaculture industry. And we're going to turn on the taps very early next year. The ability for Blair to make a radical change in the aquaculture industry will most likely begin next year. So what's the fuss all about? Currently, wild salmon obtain their omega-3 fatty acids from what we call the natural food chain. So the phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, which are eaten by smaller fish, anchovies, sprats, which are then consumed by the carnivorous fish, for example, like salmon. And this is where you currently get your omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. In aquaculture, we have a fishing industry, which goes out, catches the 16 million metric tons, and then converts the fish into fish meal and to fish oil, which is then fed to salmon, and you get your omega-3, EPA, and DHA in salmon. The breakthrough technology that Blair is working on is the following. Fish oil today has a composition of close to 14 to 18%, 28% of omega-3 EPA DHA. The technology from Blair, from the NASA scientists, is this. We can produce through fermentation using sugar as a feedstock, natural marine algae which will convert sugar into omega-3 fatty acids. An EPA and DHA concentration which is double the amount of fish oil, close to 50%, if not more. So basically, the technology in Blair removes the middleman from the trophic chain. You don't have to go out into the sea to catch wild fish stocks. You can leave that carbon in the sea and help conserve marine biodiversity. The impact of that for the aquaculture industry is the aquaculture industry could actually become a net protein producer. Currently, it takes close to 2 kg of wild catch fish to produce 1 kg of salmon. Now, there are companies who've done better. They've got it down to 1.7 kg or 1.5. But the interesting thing about Blair is the technology from Blair gives the aquaculture industry the ability to become a net fish producer. So less than 1 kg of fish is required if you use the marine algal oil. And in fact, last year, we actually grew salmon with 0 fish meal and 0 fish oil. So the natural marine algae with a high content of omega-3 EPA and DHA can actually replace fish oil. There is no compelling reason for the aquaculture industry to be still dependent on natural marine resources. You can use that fish and feed it directly to humans rather than reducing it to fish meal and fish oil. The other interesting thing for the consumer is the following. Most consumers understand that fish is healthy. However, one of the challenges we're facing and will face is we need to educate the consumer to make more informed choices. At the moment, as you can see from our surveys, less than 30% of consumers identify purchase of salmon with omega-3 or sustainability. One of our challenges is to enable and to educate consumers to make informed choices. And the choices that we want to educate the consumer to make is to identify that fish which has maximum nutrition. In other words, a high level of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. Why is that? Because not all fish are the same. If you want your omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids, the best thing you can do is have a label that tells you what the level is. And today, in most countries, it's not there. So the first thing we want to do with collaborators in the value chain, including retailers, is to have a label which identifies the level of omega-3, EPA, and DHA fatty acids. The second point is most consumers know that they need to make the right choice in terms of conserving marine biodiversity, but just don't have the information to make that decision. Fish is fish. It's on the fresh chill counter. You can hardly identify which fish has been farmed conservatively without impacting marine biodiversity and those that have been farmed not so well, which have a tremendous impact on marine biodiversity. So what we're challenging the community and some retailers is to enable the consumer to make an informed choice through proper labeling and proper education. So that's the story of Blair. We'll turn on the taps hopefully pretty soon. And right now, we're producing pilot quantities from a place in Kingstree, South Carolina. And I'm hoping your typhoon leaves us okay. Yeah? So I'd like to say thank you very much. Our ambition is to grow food within planetary boundaries, and to do that in the right way by conserving marine biodiversity. Thank you very much.